It was a crisp winter afternoon. A white police officer on his way home received an urgent dispatch. What he discovered froze him to the core. 6 young black girls huddled together in a derelict house, shivering, terrified, and utterly alone. Without a second's hesitation, he made a profound choice: to adopt them all. This singular act of compassion, viewed by some as reckless, would ultimately forge a brighter future not just for them but for him too. Before we delve into this incredible journey, has a stranger ever done something for you that you'll never forget? Share your stories in the comments below. Thomas Granger gripped the steering wheel of his patrol car, the morning sun just beginning to paint Willow Creek's quiet streets in hues of gold. The town still slumbered, windows dark, flags gently swaying in the nascent breeze. Main Street appeared exactly as it had for 2 decades. The familiar red brick bakery with its peeling awning, the worn bench outside the barbershop, and the whitewashed church steeple piercing the sleepy sky like a silent guardian. Everything in Willow Creek moved to a predictable, contained, safe rhythm, much like the life Thomas had built for himself since Helen's passing. He took a sip of his now lukewarm coffee, offering a polite nod to Mrs. Crenshaw, who was meticulously arranging chrysanthemums outside the florist. "Morning, Tom," she chirped, her voice thin but cheerful. "Church picnic still on for Sunday?" Thomas offered a tight smile, a half-hearted wave. "We'll see, ma'am. Duty calls." She watched him a moment too long, as if trying to bridge the silences that had enveloped him since Helen's death. But Thomas had nothing left for small talk, for the lingering invitations he always declined. 10 years of solitude, of folding laundry alone and microwaving single portions, had made him forget how to be part of anything that didn't involve a uniform or a badge. Back at the precinct, the low murmur of early morning chatter was abruptly cut by Sergeant Walt Mahoney's gruff voice. "Granger, got a sec?" Thomas followed him into the cramped office, cluttered with dusty commendations and faded old squad photos. Walt closed the door behind them, giving Thomas that familiar look, the one that said, "You've been drifting too long. Ever think it's time to stop living like a ghost?" "I'm fine," Thomas stated flatly, eyes fixed on the floor. "No, you're not. Here. Whatever else this is, it's not okay." Thomas's jaw tightened. "I have the job. That's enough." Walt sighed, leaning back, disappointment veiled by concern. "That's not living, Tom. That's just surviving." Before Thomas could retort, the radio on his hip crackled to life. Dispatch's voice was sharp, urgent. "Unit 3A, report of a possible child abandonment at 28 Bayberry Lane. Neighbor reports multiple minors left unattended. Proceed with caution." Thomas was already moving. "Copy that. En route." Bayberry Lane lay on the far outskirts of town, where dilapidated trailers hunched behind overgrown yards and paint peeled in long, sorrowful strips. As Thomas pulled up, he saw the front door hanging slightly ajar, the steps cracked and rotting. He stepped out slowly, his boots crunching on the gravel, hand resting on his holster. "Willow Creek Police," he called out. "Is anyone inside?" A soft sob was his only reply. He pushed open the door and the stale air hit him like a physical blow: mildew, spoiled food, something far worse. The living room was bare, save for a sagging couch and a broken lamp in the corner. 6 children huddled together, wide eyes fixed on him as if he were something both dangerous and divine. The oldest girl, no more than 12, stood protectively in front of the others, chin raised, defiant yet trembling. Her skin was dry, her braids still neatly done despite the surrounding chaos. Thomas knelt slowly. "My name's Officer Granger. I'm here to help. Can you tell me what happened?" The girl swallowed hard. "Our parents, they didn't come home. It's been 3 days." Behind her, a younger girl clung to her sister's sleeve, whispering through cracked lips, "We were hungry." Thomas's throat tightened. His hand moved to his radio, voice low but resolute. "Dispatch, this is Unit 3A. I've got 6 minors at the residence. Requesting immediate assistance. Situation's delicate." As the dispatcher confirmed, Thomas glanced at the children. They were terrified, hungry, and alone in a town that historically wasn't kind to kids who looked like them. He could already hear the whispers from across town. "Those people, where's their family? Bet there's drugs involved. Not our problem." He'd heard it all before. But something within him shifted as the girl's eyes met his again. Fearless, pleading, proud. It struck a chord that hadn't resonated since the day he held Helen's hand for the last time. This wasn't a case file. This was 6 lives unraveling right in front of him. And for the first time in a decade, Thomas Granger felt something stir in the hollow space where hope used to reside. The station buzzed with hushed voices and the rustle of paperwork as Thomas sat stiffly in the corner of the child welfare office, his uniform still dusted with dry leaves from Bayberry Lane. The 6 girls were in the adjacent room, eating sandwiches brought in by Carla, a social worker, kind, efficient, and clearly overwhelmed. Aaliyah, the oldest, hadn't spoken much since arriving. She sat close to the others, protective, her shoulders rigid every time a stranger entered the room. Thomas watched her through the glass, a tightening sensation in his chest. Carla returned with a tablet and a clipboard, sighing heavily as she sat across from him. "Thank you for your help today, Officer Granger. We'll begin processing placement immediately. We'll try to keep the siblings together, but with 6, it's unlikely." Thomas blinked. "Wait, what do you mean, unlikely?" "We prioritize sibling pairs," she replied, her voice practiced, clinical. "But there aren't many foster families equipped for more than 2, especially with the age range, trauma, and—" She hesitated, her eyes flicking toward the glass before continuing more delicately, "and the cultural considerations. Families in Willow Creek. Well, some might not be prepared to raise Black children. It can be complicated." Thomas felt the air thicken. "So you're going to split them up?" "We'll do our best, but these aren't ideal circumstances." He didn't remember standing. His hands were shaking slightly, fists clenched. "What if I took them?" Carla blinked. "I'm sorry. The girls. What if I fostered them? All 6. Silence fell between them like a stone. "Officer Granger," she began, her voice slow, careful. "Taking in 6 children, Black children, is a massive commitment. You're a single man with no parenting history, no spouse, no experience with this kind of trauma. Do you understand what you're asking for?" Thomas glanced at the window again. Aaliyah was gently wiping peanut butter from the youngest girl's chin. One by one, the girls had started to lean into her, trusting her lead. They were scared, yes, but they were together. "I do," he said quietly. "I know what it looks like. I know this town. But I also know what happens to kids who get lost in the system. They get shuffled around. They grow up believing they don't belong anywhere, that no one wanted all of them. I can't live with that. I can't walk away." Carla folded her arms. "You'll be scrutinized. This won't be easy." "I'm not asking for easy," Thomas said, his voice low, cracking at the edges. "I'm asking for a chance." The door creaked and suddenly Aaliyah was there, her small frame hesitant, but her eyes locked on his. "Sir," she asked, "are they going to send us away?" Thomas met her gaze, something catching in his throat. "Not if I can help it." A flicker of disbelief crossed her face, quickly followed by something far more dangerous. "Hope?" Carla sighed, setting the clipboard aside. "Then we've got a lot of work to do." And in that moment, Thomas Granger made a decision that would redefine every quiet morning, every lonely evening, and every belief he had ever held about what family was supposed to look like. The first morning in the Granger household began with a symphony of unfamiliar sounds. Small feet padding across hardwood floors, cereal bowls clinking, a toilet flushing 3 times in a row, and a soft giggle followed by someone yelling, "That's my shirt." Thomas stood in the hallway holding a mismatched bundle of clothes, utterly overwhelmed. The house that had once been so quiet it echoed now hummed with delightful chaos and life. The guest room had become Hope and Michaela's sanctuary. The office now belonged to Trinity and Nia, and Bria shared the attic nook with Aaliyah, who insisted on being near the back of the house in case the little ones need anything. Thomas hadn't slept much. He'd spent the night pacing the hallway listening for cries, unsure whether to intervene or stay out. At 5:32 a.m. he surrendered and started making pancakes from a boxed mix that had expired last spring. Downstairs, the girls sat cautiously at the table, watching him fumble with syrup and slightly burnt batter. "We usually had grits," Nia murmured. Thomas froze, then nodded. "Right. I'll learn." He placed a crooked pancake on Hope's plate, who stared at it, then looked up at him and whispered, "It's okay, Mr. Granger. We can teach you." He wanted to thank her, but the words caught behind the knot in his throat. The next challenge was hair. Later that morning, as Thomas knelt behind Hope with a brush in one hand and a YouTube tutorial in the other, He realized something profoundly humbling. There were entire worlds within these girls that he had never touched. The thick coils of Hope's curls resisted him at every pass, and she winced more than once. "I'm sorry," he muttered. "I'm trying." Hope reached up and gently patted his wrist. "You don't have to be good yet. Just don't give up." Outside the house, things weren't as tender. Neighbors stared longer than usual. Mrs. Callahan, who once brought Helen casseroles during chemo, now stood behind her storm door, lips pursed as Thomas loaded the girls into the SUV. At the grocery store, a clerk paused mid-scan and said far too loudly, "Are they all yours?" Thomas met her gaze squarely. "Yes, they are." He didn't have the vocabulary to name what was happening, but he felt it. The difference, the sideways glances, the whispered remarks barely disguised as small talk. Willow Creek wasn't accustomed to this kind of family, wasn't used to him like this. Back home, the girls grew more comfortable. Bria hung drawings all over the fridge, bright, swirling scenes of houses with big trees and smiling people. Trinity rearranged the bookshelves by height and genre. Michaela started dance routines in the hallway, announcing, "This is the stage, Daddy. Don't step on it." He didn't correct her use of Daddy. He could, but the weight of being their anchor pressed heavily. Each bedtime was a minefield of questions. "Will we stay? Do we still have to call you sir? When's the next meeting with the lady who smells like peppermint?" He answered as honestly as he could. "I'm learning, but I'm not going anywhere. That much I know." One night, after everyone had finally fallen asleep, Thomas stood in the hallway, the soft hum of 6 different dreams behind 6 different doors. He touched the frame of a picture Helen had painted years ago, a watercolor of their porch swing, sunlit and empty. He whispered to it as if she could still hear, "I hope this is what you meant when you said we were meant to have a full house." And for the first time in years, the house felt not haunted but inhabited, not quiet but alive. The beginning wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for Thomas Granger, that was enough. The trouble started quietly, like most things in Willow Creek. Trinity came home from school one afternoon, her backpack hanging off one shoulder, eyes shadowed, voice small. "I don't want to go back tomorrow," she mumbled, brushing past Thomas before he could ask why. He let her go for the moment, but a pit opened in his stomach. 2 days later, he was called into the principal's office. Mrs. Daly, the kind who wore tight smiles and pearl earrings like armor, folded her hands as Thomas entered. Trinity sat in a chair across from her, arms crossed, tears dried in angry streaks on her cheeks. "There was an incident," Mrs. Daly began. "A playground altercation. Trinity pushed a boy." Thomas turned to Trinity. "Is that true?" She nodded. "He called me orphan hair, and said my dad was probably just trying to look good for TV." Silence thickened the air. Thomas looked at Mrs. Daly. "And what happened to him?" "We spoke to him. His parents are involved now, but violence." "She defended herself," Thomas said, his voice sharper than usual. "You think this is about playground etiquette? It's about a child being told she doesn't belong in her own family." Mrs. Daly blinked. "Let's stay calm." "No," Thomas said, standing, his presence suddenly filling the room. "You don't get to ask calm from me when you've let a little black girl be told that her identity is a costume." Trinity's eyes widened slightly, the faintest flicker of something behind them. Validation. Back home, the tension spilled over. Aaliyah slammed a textbook on the table that night. "We knew it would happen," she said. "We knew people would think we don't belong here, that we're not your real daughters." Michaela piped up from the corner. "Are we?" The question was innocent, but it hit Thomas like a punch to the chest. He sat down slowly, his shoulders heavy. "I know I don't look like your father. I know some people out there won't see us as a real family. But I do. I see you. I love you. I chose you." Aaliyah's voice cracked. "Love isn't always enough." "No," Thomas said. "It isn't. That's why I'm going to do more than love you. I'm going to fight for you. I'm going to learn. I'm going to mess up. But I will not let this world convince you that your identity is something to be erased or explained." The house fell quiet, and for a long moment no one spoke. Later that week, Thomas showed up at New Mount Bethel Church, the town's predominantly black congregation. He stood in the back, awkward and out of place, as gospel music rose like fire through the sanctuary. When the service ended, a woman in a purple hat approached him. "Officer Granger," she said, her eyes unreadable. You look like you're here to learn. I am, he answered. She nodded. Then sit with us next Sunday. And bring those girls. They need roots as much as they need rules. That Sunday the girls wore their best, braided and nervous. They held Thomas's hands as they entered, every eye turning toward them. But by the end of the service they were clapping along, smiling, embraced. That evening, as they sat on the porch swing watching the sun dip behind the trees, Trinity leaned against Thomas and whispered, "I'm glad you didn't give up." He looked at her, heart full. "I never will." It began with fatigue, a kind of bone-deep exhaustion Thomas couldn't shake even after 10 hours of sleep. He blamed the stress. Raising 6 teenage girls wasn't exactly a quiet life, and kept going. Then came the cough. Dry, hacking, persistent. He brushed it off until one afternoon at the park while cheering for Tiana at her basketball game, his vision blurred and the world tilted. He stumbled, catching himself on the fence, breath wheezing out of his lungs as if someone had punched him. Michaela saw it first, dropping her soda and running to him. "Dad!" she cried, panicked. "Dad, are you okay?" He smiled weakly, waving her off, but inside he knew something was terribly wrong. The diagnosis came 2 weeks later. Stage 3 non-small cell lung cancer. The kind of news that strips the air from a room. Thomas sat in the sterile hospital office, the word cancer echoing in his ears like a gunshot. He didn't smoke. He exercised when he could. He had plans. He had 6 daughters who still needed him, who depended on him. Dr. Lanning's voice was gentle but firm. "We'll start treatment immediately. Chemo, radiation. You'll need support." Support. The word rattled around his brain like broken glass. He didn't want to tell them. He didn't want to watch Aaliyah's eyes fill with fear, or Bria's hands shake, or Trinity shut down completely. But he couldn't hide it forever. He told them on a Sunday night. The dinner table was quiet. Spaghetti and meatballs sat untouched. "Girls," he began, his voice rasping more than usual, "I need to talk to you about something." Aaliyah knew before he said another word. Her fork clattered to the table. "What happened?" "I'm sick," Thomas said plainly. "It's cancer. I'm going to be okay, but the next few months, they'll be rough." There was silence, then Bria whispered, "Are you going to die?" Thomas's throat closed up. He reached for her hand. "I'm going to fight. I've got good doctors and I've got you." The weeks that followed were a blur of hospital rooms, medications, and exhaustion. The girls, without being asked, stepped up in ways Thomas never imagined. Aaliyah took over cooking and rides to school. Tiana, home between games, drove him to treatment. Bria organized his pills with color-coded post. Trinity read him poetry while he lay half-conscious on the couch. Nia made playlists of gospel and soul to help him sleep. And little Michaela, barely 12, sat by his side every night, holding his hand, her presence a quiet balm. One evening, after a particularly brutal round of chemo, Thomas opened his eyes to find them all gathered in the living room, blankets, pizza boxes, homework scattered on the floor. They were laughing at something Tiana had said, the sound warm and familiar. Thomas blinked back tears. "You girls," he croaked, "you're doing more for me than I ever did for you." Aaliyah looked up. "That's not true." "It is," he insisted. "I'm not your blood. I didn't give you life. You gave us a life," she said quietly. "That matters more." He couldn't stop the tears then, nor the warmth blooming in his chest despite the pain. They didn't share his DNA. They didn't need to. They were his. Every tear he wiped, every braid he fumbled with, every hard conversation. They had built something stronger than blood. They had built a family. A few weeks later, as spring returned to Willow Creek, Thomas sat on the porch swing wrapped in a blanket. The sky was dusky, the trees budding again. Michaela climbed beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. "You're not allowed to leave," she said softly. "Ever." "I'll try not to," he whispered. And in that moment, surrounded by the girls who had become his heart, Thomas Granger knew family wasn't flesh. It was choice. It was love. It was staying even when the road got hard. Especially then. 15 years had passed, yet the front porch of the old Granger house still creaked the same under Thomas's weight. The oak tree out front had grown tall enough to cast long, dappled shadows across the walkway, and the paint on the mailbox had faded to a soft, worn blue. Inside the house, laughter echoed from the kitchen, where 6 women, no longer girls, prepared for a day Thomas hadn't yet been told to expect. It was Michaela who'd convinced them to keep it a surprise. "He deserves one last first," she'd said with a wink, the kind he never got for himself. The sun had barely crested over Willow Creek when Bria slipped onto the porch, her sketchbook hugged tight to her chest. "You ready for a little field trip, Dad?" she asked, eyes sparkling. Thomas adjusted the brim of his worn sheriff's cap. "Depends. Is it a trip where I end up having to speak in front of people or wear one of those suits you girls keep trying to buy me?" Bria just grinned. "You'll see." They drove together, the girls packed into 2 cars behind him. Thomas was quiet on the ride, his eyes tracing the familiar roads of the town that had once whispered behind his back. These days the whispers had changed, turned to nods, respect, acknowledgement. Not everyone had come around, but enough had. At the entrance of the community center, a small banner fluttered in the breeze, celebrating family, love, and legacy. Inside, the space had been transformed. Photographs of the girls lined the walls, baby faces turned into bold portraits. Aaliyah in a courtroom, hand on a stack of files. Bria painting beside a class of eager first graders. Nia coaching a team of bright-eyed teens. Trinity signing copies of her memoir beneath a quote that read, "My dad once taught me that love is louder than blood." Michaela's Broadway debut photo hung beside Hope's scholarship acceptance letter. The center of the room held a podium flanked by chairs and lights. Thomas froze, overwhelmed. Then Aaliyah stepped up, sleek in a deep navy suit, her voice steady into the mic. 15 years ago, a man stood in a hallway outside a group home and decided 6 scared girls were worth fighting for. She paused, her throat catching. "He didn't share our skin. He didn't share our past. But he gave us a future. He gave us a name, a home, a reason to believe in family again." A screen behind her lit up, revealing the logo of a new foundation. 2 hands, one dark, one light, holding the roots of a tree. The room held its breath as Aaliyah continued. "Today we are proud to launch the Granger Foundation for Inclusive Families, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting multiracial adoptions, cultural training for foster families, and scholarships for children aging out of the system. Because love should never be limited by what people see on the surface." Thomas wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Bria stepped forward next. "We all chose our paths because of what he showed us, what he lived. I tell stories through pictures. Trinity tells them through words. Hope through action. We all carry a piece of him." Finally, Aaliyah returned to the mic, her voice shaking. "We were not born from our father, but our futures were. He made them possible." The room stood as Thomas was helped to the stage. He looked out at the crowd, church members, neighbors, teachers, the mayor, even Sergeant Walt, now long retired, standing with pride in the back. Thomas cleared his throat, voice thick with emotion. "I used to think I saved 6 little girls," he said quietly. "But the truth is they saved me. They pulled me out of a house built on loneliness and into a life overflowing with love. They showed me how much I didn't know and how much I still had to give. They broke down walls I didn't even know I'd built. And if anything I did help them become who they are today, then I've lived a life far richer than I deserve." Applause erupted. The girls surged forward, wrapping their arms around him in a tangled, laughing, tearful embrace. For one long moment the world fell away and all that remained was love, loud, real, and shared. Later that night, Thomas stood again on the porch, the house behind him glowing with music and stories. Aaliyah joined him, handing him a cup of tea. "You did it, Dad," she whispered. Thomas looked at the stars, voice steady. "No. We did. And now we help the next ones find their way home." The news came on a quiet Sunday afternoon, the kind that smelled like fresh rain and cut grass. Hope, now a poised and radiant 28, asked Thomas to sit with her on the porch. His porch, the same swing, the same rhythm of creaking wood and wind through the trees. She took his hand, eyes brimming with something deeper than joy. "Dad," she said softly, "I'm pregnant. It's a girl." Thomas's breath caught, the world pausing around the words. He looked at her. This woman who once clung to his leg in the grocery store because she was too shy to speak, now glowing with life and strength. That's beautiful, Hope," he whispered. Hope smiled, then leaned closer, her voice trembling. "We want to name her Helen. After Mom. After the woman who built this porch with you and dreamed of a full house." For a moment Thomas couldn't speak. His throat tightened and the tears came before he could stop them. He nodded slowly, pulling Hope into a fierce embrace, holding on not just to her, but to every second that had led them here. She would have loved that, he murmured. So much. Months passed, and when little Helen finally came into the world, the entire family gathered again, no longer 6 daughters, but 6 women with partners, careers, stories of their own. Trinity flew in from a book tour. Aaliyah cleared her trial schedule. Bria painted a mural in the nursery. Nia brought a tiny jersey with Coach's favorite stitched on the back. Michaela wrote and performed a lullaby so soft it made everyone cry. On a golden autumn evening, Thomas sat once again on the porch swing, wrapped in a thick sweater, a baby in his arms. Tiny Helen slept soundly against his chest, her breath warm and steady. Around him, the porch overflowed with life. His daughters talking, laughing, sharing stories, the sound of children running barefoot in the grass, partners leaning against railings, hands intertwined. The sky turned amber and Thomas looked down at his granddaughter, his voice a whisper lost in the breeze. I used to think family was something you were born into. But now I know it's something you choose. Every single day. With your whole heart. He smiled, the kind of smile that carries a lifetime, and gently rocked little Helen as the sun dipped low and love settled all around him, wide and enduring, like the roots of something deeply, beautifully chosen. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.